Earlier this year, I had an idea for a game where extreme amounts of blood would spew from enemies as the protagonist rips through them, splattering across the environment. I let the idea sit for a bit, occasionally thinking about it again, but now with Halloween coming up, I decided it might be a good time to try and finally implement a simple iteration of this idea. So I set out to create a tech demo, specifically to demonstrate how I envisioned the blood dynamics should work. This means that this time, the gameplay is not the focus of what I'm going to show, but the blood is. I hope your stomach's ready. To start, I made it so that blood is drawn by attacking enemies. To add some variety, I gave the player the ability to use 3 different projectile weapons, each with a unique effect on how the enemy bleeds. The hollow circle causes blood to shoot in all directions, like the enemies being blown up from the inside. The solid circle causes blood to burst out in a specific direction, like the enemies being hit with a blunt object. The cross causes blood to spurt out, like the enemy was sliced open with some blade. Obviously, in a real game, these projectiles would be replaced by actual weapons. Each type of bleed is defined by its spread and strength, which represent how much a particular blood drop may deviate from the direction of the bleed, as well as the range of exit speeds it may have. Though the slice has an additional mechanic where it lingers for a bit and the exit speed of the blood slows down over time. The direction of the bleed is represented with a spherical coordinate system, where 2 angles are used to determine the position on a sphere. Why a sphere if the game's 2D? Well, because it makes it possible to apply a corresponding 3D velocity to the drops of blood. And that's necessary because it makes the blood behave more realistically. Plus, the blood needs to be in 3D anyway to be able to hit and splatter across the wall in the background. There's also something notable about the bleed's spread. Each drop doesn't deviate uniformly, meaning each valid angle is equally possible, but non-uniformly, where the blood drop is more likely to be nearer to the bleed's primary direction. The simple method I use to achieve this is by, instead of adding one random value to the angle, you add many smaller values, which reduces the odds of an extreme result, making the bleed appear slightly more realistic. Once in the air, each drop of blood continues moving along its path affected by gravity. To make the blood appear a bit nicer, I made it render itself as a line, which makes it look like it has a small trail. From here, the blood can end up in many different places. If it hits a wall or a floor from the side, it simply disappears. I experimented with making the blood visible along the surface edge, but it looked a bit weird, so I decided against it. If it hits the ceiling, however, it gets stuck for a brief moment before falling back down. This is one of my absolute favorite blood effects because it makes the environment seem so much more active. If instead the drop hits the back wall, which simply means that its depth value exceeds a certain limit, it'll stop moving and stay there forever, turning into a sprite to optimize performance. However, there is also a chance of 2 other things happening before permanently freezing. One is that the blood begins to drip down to a random length at a random speed. The second is that a larger blood splatter sprite is created in addition to the main one. Both of these, but especially the second, are important to make the blood look convincing, as without them, it kind of just looks like spray paint. Lastly, if the drop hits no wall, but instead lands in water, it dissipates away and makes the water a little bit more red. A final gory detail to tie everything together. Overall, I'm very happy with this result. It feels both convincing and satisfying, and I could definitely imagine it being used in an actual game. This project was also a lot of fun to work on, since it was a fairly small undertaking and I could focus almost entirely on just making a cool effect. But what do you think? Is there anything else that could be added? And do you think I should turn this concept into an actual game? I'd be really interested to hear. Thanks for watching, and happy Halloween!